and we are live today with Dr. Eric Bean. Dr. Eric Bean is a director of high performance for Higher Echelon, right? Did I get that right, Eric?
You nailed it. One for one.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. For us, I think it's still morning for you out there in San Diego, right?
It is. I got another hour of quote morning, so it's good.
Is the weather nice?
Do you want to know the answer to that question, or
I'm pretty
I mean,
sure
the rest of the country is struggling right now, so I feel bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay. I think the snow's melted off just in time for it to come back tonight.
Yeah, it's not. It's a low 60s here today, so it's which is why I've got a sweater on. You know, it's cold for San Diego.
Yeah, no, I can see where that would be such a horrible.
Yeah,
to be.
Well, we persevere. You know, we're resilient.
So, I guess, Eric, let's start. What is Higher Echelon?
We're a leadership development and organizational performance consulting firm. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we provide human capital and technology services to organizations, both in the government and in the private sector, to optimize performance, whether that performance is, achieving a sales metric that they haven't achieved in a number of years, or if it's helping them evolve their culture to meet their new strategic needs, or if it's developing leaders that are either new to the leadership game or have been in leadership for some time, but are struggling with achieving the organization goals and leading the team to achieve their goals. So
you're not necessarily coaching individuals, you're helping coach organizations. Is that?
I do both, really. Okay. So I'll work with an organization, for example, out here in San Diego. We've done a lot of work with a diagnostic company, mm-hmm. and my work has been both group kind of workshops. So I'll do a leadership development or high performance workshop, and then I will do individual coaching to help tailor the content to their mm-hmm. specific needs, and then I'll also do some team coaching as well. So it's a blend of both.
I think that's kind of what you need, though, right? You have to have the organization and the individuals.
You have to, absolutely. Because if you're not really addressing the organizational challenges, then the culture or the environment around that individual is going to either support or inhibit certain behaviors. So it can't all just fall on the individual to do the right thing. The culture around them has to support them to do the right thing, enable them to do the right thing. And then also they have to step into that space themselves.
And here we got a question. Any talent acquisition and talent management embedded in your work?
Well, funny, we just finished a big project, or we're in the middle of finishing up a big project here with the Army, talent management, doing exactly that. It's helping support that career progression and aligning their values with their vision and supporting that process.
I love it. Yeah. So, okay. So we've got Higher Echelon. What is a director of high performance?
I think it's obvious, right? I direct high performance. So really what my job is and what I do day to day is four main things. I know you've got your day at work, right? I do four main things. I coach. So I work, as we talked about, individually or with groups on high performance, on enabling them to optimize their performance in whatever that domain is, whether it's leadership, whether it's sales, whether it's in the government space, acquisitions, whatever it is. So I coach. I will also create. So I will create products and content and support our team in that process as well to make sure that we are on the cutting edge. So in order to do that, I need to consume as well. So I'll do a lot of reading to stay up to date on research in high performance, in leadership, in psychology, to make sure that we are leveraging the best science out there. Mm-hmm. And then I'll connect. So I'll connect with potential clients, with opportunities, with people that I'm working with right now, to make sure that those relationships are strong. One of our sort of tagline, if you will, is a trusted partner. Mm-hmm. And that's really for us, that's making sure that we are building relationships. It's not about coming in and doing a keynote, having fireworks at the end and leaving. It's about really supporting the process that that a company is in, and somewhat embedding ourselves in their organizational goals and challenges.
Well, I already see how effective you are because I just realized your 4 things were all C's.
There you go. That's right. I try to make it simple.
Coach, create, consume, connect. I love it.
You got it. That's the way I can remember it, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it makes so much sense. So I guess you didn't just wake up one day and say, this is what I want to do, right? So what was your path to becoming the director of high performance at HigherEchelon?
Well, it was a straight, simple line. It was very easy. There was no off ramps anywhere. Really, my path started. I don't want to go too far back, but I was born in 19. Yeah, but my path started in high school, where I was in a high school golf tournament, and effectively, some would call it, I choked. I was playing great, and then my playing competitor said something. It got in my head, and it affected the next 3 or 4 holes, and I sort of limped my way into finishing the competition. After that, I realized, or thought to myself at least, what happened? My skills did not change from the 12th green to the 13th tee. I didn't get injured. I didn't hurt my arm or anything like that. The only thing that changed was my mental approach. And so that sent me and my dad on a little bit of a path to understand how the mind influences performance. My dad actually got me hypnosis tapes that I would listen to before tennis or golf competitions. And they're really like visualization tapes, visualize yourself in the great serve, those kinds of things. I like to say my dad was my first sports psychologist.
Can I just add?
Please.
You look a lot younger than you are.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Tapes, and you were a teenager. So I'm going to throw that out there. I was an investigator. I'm starting to do math in my head. I'm like, oh my gosh.
The Zoom effects are really high quality these days. So I've got those functions on. Well, so after that, I didn't know about sports psychology. I didn't know that was really a field. And so I went into did my undergrad at USC and studied psychology. And I liked it a lot. I really liked understanding, human behavior. I understand how the mind influences human behavior. And but what I didn't like was that psychology at the time, this is really right before, kind of right at the beginning of the positive psychology boom. What I didn't like was that psychology was largely focused on a mental model. What's wrong with you, and how do we get you back to normal? How do we get you to average? And it just didn't light the fire in me that I had hoped it would. And I'm thumbing through the course catalog one day that was in paper, and I came across this class, Psychosocial Aspects of Sport and Exercise. And I read the course description. I said, that's it. This is what I want to do. It married 2 of my passions, sport and psychology. And after the first class, I was hooked. And so I went down this path of sports psychology. I'll get to the high performance here, hopefully sooner than later. But I went down this path of sports psychology. And it was really about, how do we go from good to great? How do we optimize performance? How do we help an athlete who is playing well, but not to his or her potential? And I went and I got a master's and a PhD in that field. And toward the end of my PhD program, I was approached by a friend of mine, and he said, hey, we've got this program that we'd like you to be a part of. And it's the Army Center for Enhanced Performance. And so that was that first time where I really started to think beyond just sport performance and started to look at other avenues of performance, military being one of them. So then I worked with the Army. And so instead of the football field, it was the battlefield. And again, it was still on optimizing performance. Well, while I was working with soldiers at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Tacoma, Washington, I was approached by the director of the program director of ophthalmology. And he said, why aren't we doing this with surgeons? So then I started working with surgeons. And in that program, a lot of the surgical leaders wanted me to work with them to help support the work that I was doing with their surgical residents. So that started me on this path of looking at, again, beyond just sport performance. Now I'm looking at other performance domains. And then I started to look at leadership as a performance domain in that work. Came down here to San Diego to work with the Navy SEALs. and mostly with the cadre, again, a little bit with the candidates, but mostly with the cadre in the Bud side. And then I went internal to UCSD Health as an internal leadership consultant. So that's sort of how I got on this path towards looking at high performance, beyond just sports psychology and the mental game of sports. And then I've been with Higher Echelon for almost 6 years now, working in a variety of domains in terms of high performance. So that's why I like the title of Director of High Performance, because it's not just about leadership. It's not just about sales or a specific performance domain. It's about taking a broad approach to performance and then working with that individual. I'm not an expert in surgery. I'm not an expert in sales, but I work with those individuals and align with those individuals to bring my expertise and their expertise to help them get to another level of performance.
How? Yeah. I don't want to make it more simple than that. I mean, like, how do you, and just a framework, obviously, but like, how do you, who's never been a surgeon, make a surgeon better?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, I have to understand their performance domain. I have to understand what influences optimal performance, what hinders optimal performance for them. So for me, when I was working with surgeons, I studied a lot about surgery, not so that I could teach them how to be a better surgeon, but so that I could understand how the mind is interfering with that motor skill of surgery. Right. So for example, with ophthalmology, it's really a fine motor skill. So that one of the things that we know about fine motor skill is that it is easily, or I should say significantly, influenced by tension in the body, more so than a gross motor skill, lifting a heavy weight or something along those lines. So we have to then uncover, okay, where is the tension existing? So often when you're doing a surgery, it can exist in the shoulders. Now, this is physiological, but we know that psychology influences our physiology. So then I have to figure out what is causing that physiological tension from a psychological place. And so for surgeons, it is often a lack of presence in the moment. It is a concern with either a past performance. Ophthalmologists will do, upwards of 15 surgeries in a day. So if they have a struggle in the first couple, that might then influence a later surgery. So we've got to figure out a way for them to mentally offload a poor performance and stay focused and present in this performance. Because if they don't, then that is going to lead to perhaps some anxiety, some disappointment, some guilt, which we know will then cause some tension in the shoulders, which will then influence motor skill performance and execution in what they're doing. So that's how I work with surgeons, is to really uncover, or anybody, is to really uncover what are the psychological or mental components that are going to inhibit or unlock optimal performance.
And I'm sorry to ask this because it's very intriguing to me. Is it like notepad, tell me about a time? I'm serious. How do you?
A big leather couch, just sitting back and yeah.
I mean, like, how do you unpack that for? I mean, obviously, some of it's going to be different, right, between different individuals. How do you get to the core of what's going on up here? And then how do you develop exercises or something to kind of, can you walk me through that? I don't even know if I asked the question right. I'm so intrigued though.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, there's certainly going to be trends, and there's going to be things that happen to many of us. And that's where the science can really support that. It's not just this reinventing the wheel every time. In individual coaching, there's going to be some unique differences and some unique flavors that are going to influence their mind. So on a group setting, it's going to be a little bit more skill based. So we might have a pre-performance routine, and that pre-performance routine is going to have some pretty common or typical scaffolding that then the individual can personalize and sort of fill in the blanks for themselves. But that scaffolding is generally going to be some process to let go of the past, right? If I'm getting into a pre-performance routine, I want to let go of the past. I want to get really clear on what my target is, what I'm doing here right now. And then I want to do some exercises or some activities to build the mind frame or the mental characteristics that I need to perform in this specific activity or domain. So for a leader, for example, they're going to have a different pre-performance routine for a town hall if they're delivering a town hall for their organization than they would for an executive board meeting, right? Because the mental characteristics needed for those two different performances are going to be different. They're likely to be a little bit different. And so it's having that awareness to be able to do that. So I will teach that skill of pre-performance routine and then work with them either individually or in small groups to help them fill in this kind of that, fill in the scaffolding, if you will, to personalize it to what they're doing.
And then make sure that, it's up to them to continue building it into a routine, because the routine
absolutely
is make it more effective. If they do it every time, they're able to kind of unpack that and focus on the now.
Right. Exactly. And the more that they do it, the better equipped they are to, one, understanding their own triggers, internal and external triggers that are going to get them off the path. And then two, be able to recover rapidly.
So we've got a question from Kendall. So throughout your studies, have you identified things that may be considered status quo in modern day, but can have negative impacts on an individual or organization? Yeah, I know. I'm trying.
Status quo in modern day, but can have, when anybody ever says, do you have a case of the Mondays? I think that's pretty status quo, but has a negative impact on individual organizations. Certainly did on me. That's a tough question. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something. I think there's some cliches out there about being tough and having this idea of mental toughness, embrace the grind, that kind of thing, that is pretty status quo. It's pretty out there. You'll open up Instagram and you'll see some version of that. But that mentality can have a negative impact on an individual who really requires balance in order to have high performance. Mm-hmm. They really require a level of self-care, of being able to find their own activities and exercises that replenish them. And so I think that is fairly common out there to see that embrace the grind mentality, but it can actually be rather damaging to an individual or an organization.
That's a great point. Anytime you try to attribute one characteristic to everybody, it's going to cause issues. So
yeah, absolutely. And again, there's patterns and trends, but we have to be careful with boxing everybody into that one pattern or trend.
No, I like it. And just like the concept of work-life balance means different things for different people, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, so your path to becoming a director of high performance, higher echelon, your work with the SEALs, the surgeons, the Army, the private sector as well. Mm-hmm. You have a podcast you do as well, correct?
Yeah, I do. That's one of the C's that shows up under Create. We do a podcast called Coaching Through Stories, Lessons in Leadership and High Performance. And really our goal is to, we'll have CEOs on, we'll have other sports psychology or high performance coaches on, and leaders in various performance domains. And it's really to explore these stories that help us find meaning in our work, help us perform, or hopefully are fun and engaging. And so what I'll do is I'll have a guest come on and we'll explore a story that started him or her on their path, one that had tremendous impact on their values or on their leadership philosophy, and then unpack that story. How did that life experience influence them? And then we'll examine some coaching principles that can support or influence anybody on their own path to leadership or to high performance. So I'll do two things on that show. I'll have a guest, and then I'll also have I'll talk to myself, and I'll have a topic that I explore that shows up a lot in my coaching with various clients.
Can you share, I don't know if you can or not, but can you share an example of like one story or some type of story and how it kind of went?
Yeah. So, for example, we had Anthony Noto, who's the CEO of SoFi,
Mm-hmm.
and he was on our show, and he shared how he had a very challenging childhood, how his childhood was one where they were on government assistance, food stamps, that kind of thing, and was raised by a single mother. And what that life experience instilled in him was some values, values of hard work, values of really never finding any excuse. There are no excuses kind of mentality and mindset. But what that then led him to do is, and influenced him throughout his life, and certainly as the CEO of SoFi, is to help support those that are searching for financial independence. And so we kind of unpacked how this life experience has influenced his values as a man, as a person, and then influenced his values as a leader of an organization, and then influenced the values of an organization. So that's an example of one of our stories that showed up recently.
That's pretty incredible. Now it makes me think. I'm second guessing. Like, man, should I have told him my story before we started? When you said, well, tell me your story, and I'm like, no, right. I'm like, ugh. Just kidding.
We'll have to have you on the podcast.
I would love to.
There you go.
So we got a good story. We got a good question for you. So Tony wants to know how you transitioned performance psychology to the workplace. Are employees open to mental skills training, and how do you present it to them and their organization?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Tony, for that question. I think the first thing that I do is really open with this idea that leadership or working is a performance. And so then what we'll do is we'll explore some of the concepts that make up performance, and then have a conversation around, well, what is high performance? What does high performance look like for you in your role, whether it's the director of compliance or quality, or it's a national sales manager, or it's the CEO. What does high performance look like? Then we go to what are the mental components that are going to interfere with you executing on that high performance as you define it, and what are the mental components that are going to support that. Mm-hmm. And so then once we've kind of opened that conversation, we've had that conversation, we get on the same page about what is performance, what does high performance look like, what are the mental components that, again, interfere or contribute to high performance. We can then say, okay, how do we generate the mindset that contributes to mental performance, to high performance, I should say, on a regular basis? How do we develop that mindset? So then we've got that conversation going. We can then go into what are the mental skills that are going to support that on a regular basis. And for me, it really starts with self-awareness. With everybody I work with, it starts with self-awareness. You have to understand, what are your values? What are your principles? What are your guiding lights, if you will, that are both negative and positive, that are going to, again, interfere or contribute to your ability to self-regulate, mm-hmm. self-regulate under stress, self-regulate under moments of high pressure. And then what are the mental skills that are going to support you in those moments? I have there's a colleague in our field who likes to say, it's easy to have grit over a glass of wine. And it is, right? We can all be gritty. We can all be mentally tough over a glass of wine, but it's really about when it matters the most. Can you be at your best when it matters the most? When the chips are down, when it's really challenging, when you're in a situation that is causing a lot of stress, what do you go to? What are your skills that you go to be able to perform? So that's, again, where those mental skills come in. And usually when we have that conversation in the way that I laid it out, Tony, that makes people open to that idea of mental skills.
So we got Joe wants to know, what's it like working with elite athletes, executives, and soldiers? What difference do you see among those groups? And I would add, since they're all such high performers, are you ever challenged getting them to buy in?
Never. No. Yeah. I walk in the door and they're like, let's do this. Of course, that getting buy-in is one of the bigger challenges here. And getting buy-in is different for different populations.
Right.
When I was working with athletes, it's a great question, Joe. And when I was working with athletes, buy-in was, hey, I want to get better. What's going to help me get better? Tell me what I need to do to get better. When I was working with Navy SEALs and with surgeons, it was, I want to understand the science behind that. You need to share with me the science that supports this idea that you say is going to help me get better. And then they wanted to be the judge of that science.
Right.
I had surgeons, how many participants were in this study? What was the demographics? What scientific assessments did they use? How were those scientific assessments validated? So getting buy-in with different populations is a challenge unto itself. Again, in my opinion, you have to understand that population very well. Doesn't mean you have to be an expert in what they're an expert in. You have to have an understanding of that population and their environment. Working with those populations, athletes, executives, and soldiers, the differences that I see among them is really one of the main differences is whether or not a motor skill is necessary for performance. So athletes and soldiers, often you will see a motor skill is necessary for performance. So an athlete like a golfer, right? They've got motor skills. They've got to execute a golf swing under pressure and in intense situations. Whereas executives, there's not often a motor skill execution. So then what influences mental performance? It comes down to interpersonal dynamics. It comes down to decision making and those different things. So then the mental skills that are necessary for performance are going to be a little different. For example, athletes and soldiers and Navy SEALs can benefit greatly from, and the research really supports this, from visualization techniques, right? Visualization, while useful in executives, isn't at the top of my list. Occasionally, it might show up when we're working on presentations or public speaking, but it's usually not very high on the list of mental skills that I go to when working with that population.
Very interesting. A large portion of my network are transitioning service members, recent veterans, military spouses in the middle of a career transition as well. You've got me thinking about this. One of the things that I realized that maybe kind of differentiated me from some of my peers in my transition, and I've been very blessed to be able to find success, is that, early on, I kind of got a punch in the gut. We talked about the
Right.
job there where I walked in overconfident, in some ways overprepared, and still found no success. But instead of freaking out, instead of becoming overwhelmed, because there is a lot of uncertainty in the transition, there's a circle date on a calendar where you no longer have a job. I've had a job for the last 24 years. Instead of looking at it as this uncertain challenge, I looked at it as opportunity. Like I kind of flipped it in my brain and said,
Right.
well, instead of me thinking, well, I'm not going to get employed, or I'm not going to have a job, or I might not have a job, I flipped it and said, well, this is my chance. Like I can do whatever I want for the first time in my life. Let me dive in 110% and figure out what that is.
Yeah.
Let me build the best network I can to support it, and let me go out there and find my success. And once I was able to make that mental transition, it really just opened up the world to me. And I'm a big fan of positive psychology, so I think that helps as well. Is that kind of something aligned with what you do with people, help them make those transitions and find out what those barriers are?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I'm hearing from you is that your initial reaction might have been one of fear. It might have been one of, oh, what's going to happen? I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is the right idea. And that fear response causes us to really see the situation as a threat, as a threat to my livelihood, as a threat to my relationships, as a threat to my identity.
Mhm.
And what you were able to do when you reframed it as saying, well, if this isn't a threat, let's look at it as an opportunity. So if
Mhm.
I looked at it through this opportunity lens, what shows up? And the emotion that might support that, and again, the research will back this, is hope.
Yeah.
And so when I have hope, now I can start to see that, okay, I've got a goal. What am I looking for? What would be really great for me?
Mhm.
What do I really want to do? And what are the opportunities out there for me to do that? I've got that goal, and then now I can see some different pathways to
Mhm.
accomplishing that goal. Right? There might be more than one way to get to where I want to get to. And then when I start to think about some pathways, I can start to generate some self-agency, some
Mhm.
belief that I can, you know what, I can do that. I can get that pathway. I
Mhm.
can work on that piece, or I've got the strengths that are necessary for this other pathway to lead to my goal. So that ability to reframe and get there for some happens like that.
Yeah.
For others, they need support, whether it's coaching, whether it's a mentor or another party, to be able to expose the thinking and get them to kind of question that thinking that is leading to this mindset of either threat of it's not going to work out, or one that's really fear. It's kind of encased in fear, and get
Mhm.
them to expose the thinking and see, how real is that? How true is that? That there are no options out there for you, that there's nothing for you to do. And then when they can sort of see their own thinking and step back and see their own thinking, then they're able to say, okay, maybe there's another way of thinking about that.
Yeah.
And if I can help support people get them to do that on their own, that's going to lead to really high quality change. Rather than me telling them, "Oh, you got to see this as an opportunity." I'm not going to do that. I'm going to help coach them and ask the right questions for them to be able to do that themselves, so that they have their own agency, that it's not coming from somebody else. So that
Yeah.
is a big part of that transition, transition coaching.
Yeah, and it's incredible the way you explain that is as I look back, I had the job fair and then I found this platform that allowed me to connect with people. And it was the conversations I had with individuals that opened my mind up to the opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, cool.
It's
Yeah,
just a matter of me. So that was those are those supporting conversations you mentioned where I saw something that said, "Oh, I could do this," or "I
right.
could do this," and then it was just up to me to do the work to get there. So, no, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. It really kind of ties in what you do for me. In my mind, I understand it a lot better.
Yeah,
So we're already over the 30-minute limit. It
there you
happened.
go.
Sorry about that. Um, I guess two questions. Um, how can people find your podcast if they want to watch it? I'll
Yeah.
start with that one.
Yeah, so we're in three places for you to find our podcast. One is on Spotify, one is on Apple, and then of course our website, HigherEchelon.com.
Mhm.
And the title is Coaching Through Stories: Lessons in Leadership and High Performance. We don't have a picture of my face, but my marketing director would like us to change that. But you'll see that title, Coaching Through Stories: Lessons in Leadership and High Performance.
Awesome. I'm definitely gonna look it up. I at least want to watch the SoFi one. That
Yeah,
I'm.
there's some really good ones that I think you'll really enjoy.
I learned so much from hearing people's why, like why and how they've gotten to where they are.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I guess the other question would be, and this might be a tough one for you, but for someone that's in their transition or in the midst of a career transition and is feeling lost in some way, shape, or form, or overwhelmed or whatever, do you have a recommendation? And it doesn't have to be from, Dr. Eric Bean, but like, what would you
Sure.
tell them to kind of get them pointed in the right direction?
The first thing I would tell them is to find some support
Mhm.
and some people that are going to listen.
Mhm.
People that are really going to listen to what you're going through and what's happening, and not be so quick to run to advice. Everybody's great at giving advice, not always great at taking it, but everybody's great at giving advice. And somebody that's struggling in a transition may not need advice in that moment. They may need the support to, again, expose the thinking that is leading to the struggle, and then to really kind of step back from that thinking and see if they can find another way of thinking about the situation that would better support their process. So whether, again, that's a coach or a mentor, those would be my recommendations.
No, I love it. And I'm on the advisory council for American Corporate Partners, so I always put this up here. I think Joe's a fan as well, but they actually connect service members, veterans, and military spouses with mentors from Fortune 500 companies that kind of work through the process. So I think it's spot on. I think finding that cadre of mentors that can really work with you is the most important thing we can do, and everything else flows from there. Well, Eric, thank you so much for spending the last part of your morning with us today.
You got it.
Sunny San Diego. Really appreciate everything you do for us, and let me know when you want to do the podcast. I'm happy to come on.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Bye.